I played a chess game recently where I was winning for most of it, and then I kind of threw it away at the end. And it was just sort of a game for fun with a friend, right? And so no big deal. I figured I would probably find some interesting things when I went to analyze it later. And I was right. I found some very interesting things. In particular, I found 3 knight moves that I totally missed during the game, which could have saved the game for me. And they're quite interesting ones, and I thought they were worth sharing because I feel like seeing these kinds of patterns and kind of looking at them and analyzing them closely can help us to find these sorts of patterns in future games, even though we may have missed them during the actual game. So let's dive in. This was an in-person game with my friend Phil, and I was playing with the white pieces for this game, and I started with e4. And Phil and I both sort of play a lot into this Vienna Gambit main line. I have some other videos about this opening, and so he plays kind of this interesting line. You'll see it a little bit later, but this is where he kind of deviated from what he usually does. He played this knight c6 move, which does appear to be the best move according to the database. I brought out my bishop, and we traded here on c3, and then this is what Phil likes to do these days against the Vienna Gambit, is bring the queen out to h4. I block, we trade queens, and this is where we're at. Now, in this variation, I actually felt really good at this point because I could trade off my bishop for this knight and really damage his pawn structure over here on the queen side. So the downside, though, is that my knight can't develop to f3 because of this pawn up here. And I also have this isolated pawn. But really, I was feeling pretty good. Apparently, according to the database, black is actually a little bit better. And I think the engine prefers black here as well, but just by a little bit. But practically, I felt like this was a pretty good position for white. So I developed the knight to e2, and he brought out the bishop, and then I just brought the knight up here. And so I'm immediately trying to go after some of black's weaknesses, in particular this c-pawn on c6. And I was kind of expecting him to push, and then maybe I would come down here and then sort of attack it with the knight and then attack it with the bishop or something like this. But he just moved his bishop back to b7. And so I just developed naturally. And I was actually kind of looking at pushing this pawn to get rid of my isolated pawn weakness while also getting a discovered attack on the other c pawn, the other doubled pawn over here. So a6, this was kind of a nice move. I was expecting that at some point he might try to push this c-pawn, and then I can just kind of jump my knight around. So this prevented me from putting anything on b5. And now I went ahead with my plan. I pushed e6. He brought his bishop out. I got rid of my isolated pawn with a check, prevented him from castling, although at this point it's there's a lot of pieces off of the board, so it's, you know, the king is not that weak, even though it is unable to castle. So I castled, kind of threatening some discovered attacks here. King g6. And then this was kind of an interesting move. The engine doesn't love it, but I figured I can actually attack this pawn, and it looks like it's being defended here. And in the game, Phil actually grabbed this rook and brought it over here and kind of hovered in the air. And then he's like, no. And he put the rook back. And then ultimately he played this move instead, because it actually is attacking this pawn, because if my knight takes here, let's just say he plays, you know, the move that he was thinking of. If my knight takes here, now my bishop is actually defending it through the opponent's bishop. So just kind of a neat little tactic there. Like I said, the engine doesn't love it. The engine thinks that black can just bring this rook. And then what is it? If I play my knight here, there's something that the engine thinks it might even be like, I don't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter that much. In any case, he played the rook here to defend the pawn. And then I brought my rook to an open file. He finally traded off this bishop. And now, the big issue with my position is that black has a passed pawn. It is an isolated pawn, but it's a passed pawn, and it's on my side of the board. It's not far. It's three squares away from promotion, right? And so he brings the rook to try to kind of defend this pawn. And now I'm kind of thinking about, how can I capture this pawn? But I also feel like I didn't take it quite seriously enough. I was thinking, this pawn is both strong and weak. It's strong because it is close to promotion, but it's weak because it's going to be hard for him to defend. And so I actually could have taken the pawn right away. And this might have worked, but I didn't like that it kind of pins my knight here. It's fine because I can move my knight away with a check, or I can even move my knight away defending the rook, so it totally would have been fine here. But instead, I moved the knight, creating a threat on this bishop, which he defended. And then at this point, I really should have taken the pawn. I should have either taken it with the rook like that, and then, you know, maybe there would have been a trade here, and this would have been fine. What I didn't like was that then this rook could come in with a tempo, and again, if I move my rook here, then it kind of pins the knight. But, you know, maybe I can move the rook up here, or even up here to d7. Not right away, I guess. I need to move the knight. Maybe I put the knight back here and attack the bishop. I don't know. But I just didn't like that. So instead, what I did is I played rook e1. And I was thinking that now I can at some point trade off my knight for this bishop, getting the rook onto kind of a worse square, and then I can take this and have my rooks kind of doubled up, or maybe even take with this rook and have them doubled on this rank as well, which also wouldn't be too bad. But I totally just should have taken, even taking with the knight here would have been perfectly fine. But instead, when I went here, it allowed e3. Now, according to the engine, e3 is actually a blunder, interestingly enough. And so I told you I was going to show you 3 brilliant knight moves. Here's a bonus really cool move, actually a rook move. Here, rook b4 is a really nice move, which I missed, of course. I didn't play this during the game. But the reason this is interesting is because I have a double attack on this bishop. And when the bishop moves out of the way, rook takes e3, which looks like it doesn't work because isn't it being defended? But the black rooks are defending each other. And so if black takes my rook, then I take here, and now this bishop is going to fall. So pretty cool move. Like, of course, I would have had to see it back here that like there was the attack and then all of that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting pattern, especially getting here where it looks like this rook can be taken, but because the rooks are defending each other, it works. Because even like, you know, this rook capture doesn't work because then I can just take with this one. So either way, this works out, and it's a pretty interesting pattern to recognize and look at and maybe, you know, see in a game in the future. But I did not see that, and so instead I moved rook f3, which I labeled as a mistake just simply because I didn't find the rook b4 idea. But what I was thinking here is the pawn will keep moving, but once the pawn gets here, I was thinking, now how is black going to defend it? And what I kind of missed, I saw it, but I didn't take it seriously enough. I missed that my b pawn is weak. And the problem is, black can now play bishop c8, bringing this bishop around to defend, and that move comes with a tempo because that pawn is under attack. So I could take here, but then black is going to take here, and now I'm the one with some serious weaknesses. These pawns are looking pretty bad. I guess black has the same weaknesses, so maybe it's kind of looking drawish. In fact, with the pawn structure is symmetrical, and I still maybe have this move, but anyway, I just didn't want to get into any of that. So I played b3, and this is where the first brilliant knight move comes in. So I played b3, which was not amazing, but it was a way to defend this pawn. But when looking at it with the engine later, it turns out knight d3 was a great move here because it defends the b pawn, and it also brings my knight kind of more into the action. I had been thinking later about rerouting the knight over here, which is both a check and it's forking that pawn. And so it kind of gets my knight into the action while defending that pawn. And I think this is something that it's always worth looking for, is kind of a move that serves multiple purposes. This move gets the knight into the action while also defending this immediate threat, as opposed to this move, which is what I played, which only addresses the threat, but it doesn't really help to get my knight into a better position. But I mean, to be fair, like it also looks like the knight is attacking that pawn as well. that's not really true because the rook can always slide over and then this pawn is going to fall once I move the knight out of the way. So the knight is not actually well placed here, but it kind of looked like it was, which I think is why I didn't sort of notice this during the game. In any case, bishop g4 to defend this pawn, and now one move too late. Now I play knight d3 because I'm looking at, I really want to win this pawn, and with the bishop defending it, I felt like my only real option was to grab it with the knight because I can't really happily get it with the rook anymore. So I brought the knight, kind of looking to try to get it. And now rook bd8. And this has actually a really sinister threat. If the knight ever moves, then there's potentially rook d1, defended by the pawn and pinning my rook to the king as well. So this is kind of a scary move, and it's something that, as you'll see, I probably should have taken a little bit more seriously than I did, but I was watching this. I did see it as a possibility. I delivered this check, thinking that I can, deliver the check, and then I'll be attacking this pawn. I can't take it right away because then rook d2 kind of double pins my knight, and that's pretty bad. This pawn is falling, this pawn maybe as well. So I couldn't do it right away. But this is where there's actually another brilliant knight move. And the brilliant knight move is actually h3. So yes, this is not a knight move. However, I was considering this move because I was thinking, maybe I can push this bishop away, or at least if the bishop takes, which I labeled as a blunder, which you'll see in just a second, but I was thinking if the bishop takes, then I take this pawn. Now, this isn't the outcome that I wanted, right? I wanted to win this pawn, and instead I'm trading. But if the bishop had taken here, there's actually knight f4 check, and now the bishop is in a fork, right? And so that's why this move is a blunder, actually, because they just simply lose the bishop. And so I totally, if I had seen the possibilities for knight f4 and attacking this h3 square, I could have played h3 and this would have been a really nice move. But I didn't see that either. So that was brilliant knight move number 2. Didn't see it, so I played this instead. And after the king moves, now I played h3, and now it's kind of a mistake. Maybe not as much as I thought it was in the game, but this was a bit of a mistake because now it allows this rook d1 move. Because I was thinking here, the bishop might have to move, and then I can block it out, and then I can finally win this pawn. But Phil played here with the rook d1, and in this position, I resigned. Because I was not seeing a way out of all of the threats here. So this rook is pinned. If I capture, of course, there will be a promotion. If I capture here, then actually that just loses a rook entirely. If I capture here, then this one's a little bit harder to see, but if I capture here, then this also loses a rook because these rooks are defending each other, even though there's this rook in the way. If this rook captures either way, then it will be taken. And there's even, back here, there's even just the potential of that, but this is actually much better. And so I didn't see a way out, and I resigned. But there is a move here that saves the day. And so just pause the video for a second, see if you can find which move actually saves the day for white. It's still not great. White isn't winning anymore, but it is potentially going to be a draw after this move, or at least the engine thinks it's a draw after this move. So I'll just give you a second to take a look for that move. And after you've taken a second to look for it, the move is brilliant knight move number 3, knight d3. And the reason this works is because now this rook is protected, and also the knight is protected. So capturing here doesn't work. I can just simply take back with the knight. And white still has problems. This pawn is still an issue, but according to the engine, black only has a very slight advantage in this position, and is probably starting to look pretty drawish. So I just thought that it was pretty cool looking through this game and seeing these 3 very interesting knight moves, because sometimes knights can be so tricky, right? I know I've lost endgames as well, where I have a bishop against a knight, and yet the knight can manage to kind of maneuver in interesting ways that is hard to see, especially 3 or 4 moves ahead. And and totally save the game, even though the knight seems like it should be a bit weaker than the bishop in the end game. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this video might help you to kind of see some of these sorts of patterns with knight moves in the future. I know this game is going to help me with that sort of thing. So if you enjoyed it, definitely hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this, and I will see you in the next one.